WWE provides a grand stage for its stars to shine on platforms beyond pro wrestling. However, let's face it, not everyone is The Rock or John Cena. And usually, when people fail in the movies, they fail big. In today's video, you'll follow the stories of wrestlers who tried to become Hollywood stars, but were quickly reminded of their place. But first, please subscribe to the channel, give us a thumbs up, and click the notification bell. Now, without further ado, let's get into the content. Number 5. Ted DiBiase Jr. Ted DiBiase Jr. seemed to have it all. Good-looking and capable of delivering solid performances in pro wrestling. In theory, he was the complete package for low-budget action films. But what we saw in practice was far from that. The movie tells the story of Joe Linwood, a Marine sniper whose vacation turns into a rescue mission when rebels take over the resort where he and his wife are staying. Joe must use his military skills to save his wife and the other hostages from the terrorists. However, the reception to Ted DiBiase Jr.'s performance was largely negative. Critics pointed out that his acting lacked the charisma and intensity needed for an action hero. One review mentioned that DiBiase's performance was horrible, and he spent most of the movie in a safe campsite while his wife was held hostage, questioning the believability of his character's concern for her. Another point were the comparisons with John Cena, who had starred in the first film in the franchise. Even though this wasn't his best performance, Cena still had a good screen presence. And seeing the way in which DiBiase was able to continue with the franchise, it was disappointing to say the least. In the end, the film went directly to DVD and received a 34% acceptance on Rotten Tomatoes. And after its release, nothing kind of happened. The creative team returned with DiBiase to the normal shows as if nothing had happened, and no one was crazy enough to invest a penny in a movie starring him. Number 4. Triple H. All of Triple H's success in the world of pro wrestling made managers, and probably himself, believe that Paul Levesque could in fact become the new star of pro wrestling on the big screen. His first attempt was in Blade Trinity, which is easily the worst film in the franchise. In the film, Triple H plays Jarko Grimwood, a muscular and fierce vampire enforcer working for the main antagonist, Danica Talos. Seeing him around real actors like Ryan Reynolds and Jessica Biel is embarrassing to say the least. And on top of that, it's a little sad to see one of WWE's most influential figures treated in such a small way, just to be in a big movie. His other main attempt occurred in 2011, with the comedy, The Chaperone. The film follows the story of Ray Bradstone, Triple H, an ex-convict who tries to start anew by chaperoning his daughter's school field trip, only to be pursued by his former gang members. Critics generally panned the movie for its flat direction, predictable script, and overall lack of imagination. Triple H's performance was a focal point of the criticism. Eric Cohn of IndieWire rated the film a CE, noting that Triple H was haplessly stuck on cruise control, implying that his performance lacked depth and energy. Nick Shager of Slant Magazine gave the film half a star out of 4, describing it as a Hulk with a heart of gold fable that embraced cliches with little creativity. He criticized Triple H's acting as stiff and uninspired, which did not help elevate the film's weak narrative. Number 3. Big Show. Within this list, Big Show is probably the athlete with the greatest number of appearances on television and cinema. But to summarize how shameful his career was on the big and small screens, let's focus on the sitcom, The Big Show Show. The show followed a fictionalized version of Big Show, adjusting to retirement and family life after his oldest daughter moves in with him. While Paul White is a charismatic figure in the wrestling world, his transition to sitcom acting did not translate well. Critics found his performance lacking depth and comedic timing. His portrayal of a stay-at-home dad felt forced and did not carry the charm needed to elevate the series. The show's writing was criticized for being overly simplistic and formulaic. It relied heavily on clichéd family sitcom tropes without offering anything new or engaging. From the get-go, the show got a reception colder than Mr. Blonde's Heart. Critics and viewers alike found it about as exciting as a Sunday drive through a deserted town. IGN, always ready to call a spade, pointed out that the show might barely scrape by with younger audiences or families craving some benign, lighthearted fluff. But when it came to delivering real laughs or heartfelt moments, The Big Show fell flatter than a bad joke at an open mic night. Ready Steady Cut didn't pull any punches either, labeling it middle of the road and not particularly funny. The show got axed after just one season. Netflix pulled the plug faster than Vincent Vega on a tough hit. Co-creator Jason Berger took to Twitter, giving a nod to the few loyal fans who stuck around. But even he couldn't sugarcoat the bitter truth. The show just didn't make the cut. It couldn't muster a significant following or critical acclaim, leaving it to fade away like a one-hit wonder. Number 2. Hulk Hogan. Alright, let's talk about Hulk Hogan's movie career. Picture this. You've got one of the biggest wrestling icons of all time. A guy who could draw crowds like moths to a flame in the ring. But when Hulk Hogan decided to step into the world of cinema, it was like watching a heavyweight champ swinging wildly and missing every punch. First up, we've got No Holds Barred, 1989. This was supposed to be Hulkamania, running wild on the big screen. Instead, it was more like a headlock that wouldn't end. The film was an over-the-top wrestling drama where Hogan played Rip, a character so wooden you'd think he was carved out of a 2x4. The plot? Forgettable. The acting? Even more so. Critics panned it for its nonsensical storyline and Hogan's performance, which was about as subtle as a steel chair to the back. Nyara Mr. Nanny, 1993, followed, where Hogan played a former wrestler turned bodyguard for some bratty kids. Imagine Home Alone, but without the charm, wit, or any redeeming qualities. Hogan's attempt at physical comedy and heartwarming moments fell flat, making this film another black mark on his Hollywood resume. It was like watching a bear trying to juggle. You kind of feel sorry for the guy. And who could forget Santa with Muscles, 1996? Probably everyone who watched it, because this movie was a disaster of epic proportions. Hogan as an evil millionaire with amnesia who thinks he's Santa Claus is as ridiculous as it sounds. His performance was panned for being over the top in all the wrong ways, turning what could have been a fun holiday flick into a cringe fest. So why did Hulk Hogan's performances bomb harder than a dud firecracker? For one, Hogan's charisma in the ring didn't translate to the silver screen. His acting range was about as broad as a toothpick, and his delivery was often stilted and unnatural. He lacked the nuance and depth required for film, making his characters more caricatures than credible personas. Critics and audiences couldn't suspend their disbelief enough to see him as anything other than Hulk Hogan, the wrestler trying too hard to be an actor. Number 1. Stone Cold. You've got a guy who dominated the wrestling world with his rebellious persona, but when it came to the silver screen, Austin's career fizzled out faster than a beer in the Texas sun. First up, The Condemned, 2007. This was supposed to be Austin's breakout role, playing Jack Conrad, a death row inmate forced into a deadly game for a reality TV show. The premise had potential, but the execution was more botched than a missed Stone Cold stunner. Critics ripped it apart, calling it a mindless, brutal slog with zero character development. Austin's performance was as wooden as a turnbuckle, lacking the intensity and charisma that made him a wrestling icon. The film was panned for being overly violent without any substance, leaving audiences cold. Next, we have Damage, 2009. Austin played John Brickner, an ex-convict seeking redemption through underground fighting. Sounds gritty, right? Well, not so much. The film was a bland, cliché-ridden mess. Austin's attempt at portraying a tortured soul fell flat, and his fight scenes couldn't save the plodding plot and dull dialogue. Critics noted that while Austin looked the part, his acting chops were about as sharp as a butter knife. Knockout, 2011, saw Austin in a mentor role training a young boxer. Think Rocky meets the Karate Kid, but with none of the heart or inspiration. Austin's performance was uninspired, and the film itself was a forgettable slog through sports movie tropes. His attempts at delivering heartfelt moments came off as awkward and forced, making it clear that the squared circle was his true home, not the silver screen. So why did Stone Cold's film career crash and burn? For one, his transition from wrestling to acting didn't bring the same rebellious energy that made him famous. his performances lacked the depth and nuance needed to carry a film. Instead of evolving as an actor, Austin relied too heavily on his wrestling persona, which didn't translate well to varied roles on screen. Critics and fans saw through the tough guy facade, noting that his characters were often just stone cold in different clothes. And that's a wrap for today, folks. Tell me what you thought of the video and if you managed to have even the slightest bit of fun with any of these films. So that's it. Until next time.